She was the first African-American to make her debut at the Metropolitan Opera.
She was pursued by nobility and aristocracy. She enjoyed the life of a diva.
Marian Anderson was the first African-American artist to be signed by RCA Victor.
She was performing in Europe for kings and queens, and she would come back home to her own country and have to sit at the back of the train. In response, she stood flat-footed, and she sang.
Easter Sunday, April 9th, 1939.
There was a multitude such in your wildest imagination.
Even though we may not be able to articulate why that person's voice moves us so much because it's speaking to so many different parts of who we are, that's what her voice had, this incredible power in it to stop a nation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Q&A for the film Marian Anderson, The Whole World in Her Hands, by Emmy and Peabody Award-winning director Rita Coburn. My name is Mimi Plochet, and I am Artistic Director of the Chicago International Film Festival. I just have to say, after I watched the film a few weeks ago, I let Rita know just how grateful I was for her, or to her, for making this film, which is a beautiful and compelling portrait of such an important artist and figure in our country's history. I was truly inspired. So I would like, again, to thank Rita and American Masters for sharing this film with us and with audiences across the US. The film is available locally on WTTW's website and on pbs.org through the end of the month. So I ask you to watch it again, get the word out, just tell everyone how fantastic it is. I am delighted tonight to introduce the participants of tonight's discussion. Our moderator is Joyy Norris. Chicago-born and reared, Joyy is a writer, film programmer, and creative. Her work is significantly influenced by her identity as a Black American woman, investing in discovering solutions to the issues that plague society through art and conversation. Welcome, Joyy. Of course, we are also very happy to have in conversation the director of the film, Rita Coburn, who, as I mentioned before, is an Emmy and Peabody Award winner. Thank you, Rita. Also with us is the executive producer of the film, Brenda Robinson. So Brenda signed on as a producer very early in the process of the film, understanding the great potential both of the subject and also of Rita as a creative, a smart, inspiring director. Thank you for being here, Brenda. And also I'd like to thank actor Regina Taylor, who is the voice of Marian Anderson reading her letters in the film. Regina also served as a reader, rough cut strategist, artist, and supporter of the film. So thank you for being with us here, Regina. Of course, we are honored to have these four amazing and talented women joining us as we have timed this discussion tonight at the end or toward the end of Black History Month, right as we lead into Women's History Month. So thank you all for making this film and for participating in the conversation tonight. To our audience, we'll have time for some of your questions about partway through the conversation. So please use the Q&A box to put your questions there. And now I'm going to hand it over to Joyy.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for that introduction. And I have to echo Rita, Brenda, Regina, thank you so much for bringing us this film. It is incredibly touching. It makes you love Marian in a very personal way. And I wish I just knew so much more about her when I was younger. I would like to get our conversation started with asking you all and presenting to Rita first to respond with, how did you all come to know Marian Anderson, right? Within Black History Month, we're constantly learning about these incredible people, right, within our community who have been overlooked and treated as invisible. And we're learning about new people every year, it seems like, unfortunately, and fortunately, their stories and names are becoming more known to us. But I would love to know how you all came to know her and want to tell her story. So Rita, please.
Well, I came to know of Marian Anderson because I have a daughter in her 30s, and my daughter was studying opera. And it was something that we grew up with. We grew up in Pittsburgh, and we lived across from Heinz Hall. And I took the kids to see Peter and the Wolf. And so I always wanted, it was our go-to music, because you could do anything else to classical music and to jazz. So I knew of her from some time. But I have to say that as my daughter studied, and I read Rosalind Story's book, and because you're always trying to help your children, that was my Black history knowledge of her, but I knew nothing in comparison to what I learned when I began to research her. So I have to say that as well.
Thank you. Brenda, would you like to share?
Thank you. And I just want to start by thanking Rita for giving me the opportunity to be part of this, just with you, and to go on this journey with you. You've just always done a magnificent job taking the stories of strong Black women, our heroes, and bringing them to the world and making them accessible. So I feel privileged right now to be here. And this was just really meaningful for me because I grew up a student of classical music, starting from a very young age, and have always just been interested in music. Started out in this industry as a music attorney, and I was very focused on classical music and opera. And so I spent time studying people and just trying to learn about the greats. And I never thought 20 years ago, when I was coming out of law school, that I would actually have the opportunity to be able to help tell their stories. That is a huge deal to me. And it has just been so great that, just like Rita said, thought I knew so much about people, but not until you actually get into a process like this, where you have to go through and research and really understand who a person is. That's when you really get to know them. And so I know that I was able to get to know Marian Anderson even more so by going through this process. And my hope for this film is just that people have that same experience, that they can watch this, they can learn a little bit more about her. We know just the significant place that she has in our history, but this film really gave us the chance to just know her as a person, to humanize her and to understand more of her backstory. And it has been a joyful journey to be on, truly.
Thank you. Regina.
Yes, I want to thank Rita and Brenda for this undertaking, bringing Marian Anderson to this present moment and introducing her to another generation. I know growing up, I remember her from pictures, from clips of her, of course, the Lincoln Memorial moment, and this piercing voice, this haunting voice, this very unique sound that continues to resonate, that I loved her brown face, her beautiful sparkling eyes, and that voice. And she was inspiring to me as a child, the possibilities. So I'm just overjoyed with this film to celebrate her and to let us see the different facets of her, where she came from and how she got where she got. And in those times continues to inspire us now.
Absolutely. I want to get into that maybe a little bit later on, how you felt inspired by her, because there's that moment where Ozzie Davis, right, talks about how he heard her perform and was just like, yes, through the arts, he felt that there was that way for him to impact the world and have a place. I do first want to get into what it took to bring this story to life. Documentaries aren't easy, and you have so much information, and kudos to you, Rita. everyone has mentioned it, I feel like I knew her. I mean, obviously it really helps to have the audio of her speaking, right? To have that tape of her giving her firsthand experience. So I would love to know what that process was like, bringing this documentary to life and just choosing what it looks like kind of behind the scenes, to have all these archives, massive archive to pull from and to create her story from that. If you like to, Sarah.
Well, I thank you, Joy, and I'm really, really excited to be here with the Chicago International Film Festival, and both Regina and Brenda and I sat on the Black Perspectives Board. This is an important moment for us always to have an opportunity to cultivate and then excavate our history and share it. And it is quite a journey. It's a journey from the executive producer that Brenda was to say, I have to go out and find the money for this film, because none of these things get done without money. And that was very, very important. And the money then allows me to have 917 shots and contracts, from a newspaper article to a piece of footage and what have you. Without the money, I couldn't do it. I think one of the things, and I know you were probably going to say this as well, Joy, but one of the things too that Regina helped me with is being a writer. And you get to a point in a story and you're circling yourself and you need another artist to say, hey, look at that this way. Or as an actress, maybe the photograph, if you came from the hands to the face, what, you know, so this was a community effort in that sense. And I'm very collaborative. At the same time, I'm very focused. And my focus is Marian Anderson. Whenever there was too much material, what got cut was what did not land on her, as Regina would say. It has to land on her. And if it doesn't land on her, it goes. But the University of Pennsylvania has 6,000 letters. What were they writing about? They didn't use phones as much, not when you're overseas. 6,000 letters, 4,000 photographs. And it was my blessing to walk in and just say, I'm going to go hang out there for 5 days. And one of the curators said to me, you know, when you put together a collection like this, and Marian Anderson kept everything, it takes decades. But we just found some recordings from when she was doing her book. Would you like to hear them? And automatically, when you're a documentarian, you chase the story till it chased you. I went there, it found me. I must listen. 34 reel-to-reel tapes later, transcripts. What is Marian saying? And what I found was her voice wasn't that demure person that you hear about. Her voice was rich, full of agency. She was an entrepreneur. She loved her family. They loved her. She supported them. She was a Black woman born in 1897 that found her voice, not just her singing voice, as a young girl. And I thought, whoa, I'm in. She had me from 1897, but the fact that she did so much made me eager to excavate as much as I could.
Thank you. And you did, you did a fantastic job. And also, I might have to go to Pennsylvania, because some of those correspondence with Orpheus, I was like, about him. But
they didn't all get
they
it.
Figured it out.
I can tell you that. They were quite interesting. And they were, I mean, we talk about Black love, that's been recent, right? This was some serious Black love. You know, I'm a writer, write me back. You know, but everything was there. When they had money problems, when they had, you start from a point of failure. You have 2 hours, somebody lived 90 some years in the context of this Black American life. once you realize you can't tell it all, you then relax into, I'll do the best that I can, and the sisters and the brothers will come and help me.
Absolutely. Brenda and Regina, would you like to share what your experience was like once you started seeing the footage coming in, or, you know, hearing about, you know, how the narrative was starting to form? Yeah, how do you talk about, Brenda, you know, specifically the financial aspect, and of course Regina is like this creative consultant, you know, how do you give that kind of direction when you have all of this information for such a wonderful person and a full life like this?
I think in terms of just how to make these things real, you know, it starts with having a director and a visionary who you can feel confident in, that you know that they can tell the right story in the right way. And we have a lot of luminaries on this call tonight, and they know a thing or two about this. And this is a film that, as you saw, relies heavily on archival footage, and Rita going to Philadelphia, which, you know, we call Marian Anderson the Lady of Philadelphia. That's how she's known. And there was so much history there. And it takes a really skilled storyteller to be able to go and sift through thousands of pages of documents and photographs and figure out, how do I synthesize this into a coherent film that's under 2 hours? I mean, that just requires a high level of technical skill. And as we're thinking about how to structure film financing, you know, we look to those funders, many of whom are philanthropists who just believe in the story and believe in the vision, because with documentary, you don't necessarily know where the story is going to end up, and you follow it. And good director evolves with the story. And we know that even though there is written history about Marian Anderson, you can go online now or read about her in books, there is all this hidden stuff that only comes out when you actually start digging into something. And that's what you want to see in a film like this. You want the audience to be reminded of all the things that are great that they may be familiar with, but you also want to bring to them things that they wouldn't have known if not for watching this film. So that was our job. It was to go on and be an archaeologist of sorts and just go in and find those parts of the story and those aspects of her life that would not be accessible to us if not for the film. So that's the pitch to the funders. You know, you're coming in, you're telling them this is important. And as Regina said, this is timely. And you want to help emphasize just why it's important to preserve this history, why we should be telling these stories. And we are in this moment where we are starting to see more care given to highlighting these stories. And, you know, it's stories about Black culture in the community. And these are all examples of Black excellence. Those are the things that I talked to the funders about. And I said, we need your support to be able to tell this now, because this not only impacts us, it impacts you. And we're excited that we had a very diverse group of people who stepped forward to support this. And they had full confidence in this team to be able to handle this history responsibly. And so that is the process that you go through each time you start over. But it starts with having confidence in the storyteller and the visionary, that they will be able to take this massive history and turn it into something that can be accessible for as broad an audience as possible.
Thank you. Regina.
Again, I applaud Rita. She is ferocious, and she goes at the story, and it is not an episode in her life, but her life. Her life, which is such a full life. And where do you begin then in telling that story? It's wonderful that Rita does have a vision, and that she is ferocious, that she goes through the information ravenously to find out those points, shedding light on those moments, and putting those moments together. How do you do that in telling the story of a woman's life, and what an amazing life, starting with this woman, this African American woman, this chocolate skinned African American woman,
Yeah.
wanting to sing, and wanting to sing in a particular way that was just as you had at her entrance, for whites only, that she entered into these doors and made those structures, those houses, her own. She owned them, through uh, the illumination of her spirit through her voice. And that was a daunting task, but she met the challenge. How did she do that? What encouraged her? What was the beginning of the seed of becoming Marian Anderson? Those questions are questions that pinpoint um, her trajectory through a very full life. That how do you orchestrate that? Those are the questions of this really brilliant mind, Miss Rita, uh, that she undertakes and accomplishes in a brilliant way.
Speaking of voices, because I'm really captivated by Regina's voice, and I have to say, it's thrilling that
It is a
you
lovely
listen to
voice.
her. You're kind of lulled into this, like, it just so elegant and captures it so beautifully. And Regina added so much to this film in being Marian Anderson's voice. And if we want to talk about just style and structure, as you all saw in the film, Rita employed different techniques for telling the story. It wasn't just a straightforward cutting together of archival and just sort of stringing along that in the hopes that a narrative might emerge. You know, Rita's trademark is she incorporates reenactments in these films so that you can better imagine as an audience member exactly what you're seeing and hearing. And I thought that was done to great effect in this instance because it was woven together very seamlessly. And I never felt as an audience member that I was taken out of the story. I felt like, oh, wow, I forgot that I was looking at something in the present because the narrative continued very consistently. And sometimes you have to do that to just make up for gaps and obviously things we wouldn't see. They wouldn't have access to footage of her family at home and things like that. And so one of the things that was employed here that I loved was just the use of skilled, talented, magnificent actors, Regina and Harry Lennox, who brought those letters to life. And the fact that Rita made an artistic choice to include that as one of the through lines in this film, I thought just really brought out the story in a much fuller way that we could imagine, we could see, and kind of bring more attention to that relationship. Because when people look back on Marian Anderson in history, we do focus on her singing and her being a trailblazer, all these important things, her breaking barriers and just paving a way for the rest of us. And what I loved is that we got to see those other parts of her life, and it was brought to life by Regina and Harry Lennox, who could actually help us imagine a voice. And I just thought it was just so beautifully done. And I really appreciated that we could make a film that included all of those elements to still create a whole, a story that really was accessible to all of us.
Yes, that you see her as a child. You see her relationship with her mother, her father, the foundational people, and those people who continue to carry her through. We saw her as a woman, and yes, I love those letters. very, that woman, that sexy woman who was like being courted by so many people, including the brother. How is that going to pan out with these various people? How does she choose? And she chooses, at first, she chooses her career. She chooses this mission that's put upon her by her voice. And then she's torn, and then she figures a way to try and find that balance. All of that. The public woman, and then yes, Brenda, the personal as well, all plays out in very moving ways. And in that that public way, again, changing, rearranging, reinventing, inventing the expectations of being a Black woman. That image globally is changed through her life.
Absolutely.
I like when Raymond Arsenault says that it was out of the realm of America to think that a Black woman could be beautiful. And the fact that she was a darker skinned Black woman, some things that didn't make the cut, but they likened her in Germany to a chocolate bar. And they didn't know where to put this, but they saw her beauty. I think that when you talk about Regina, there are choices you make. Every film doesn't have to be chronological, but I felt that this film needed to be chronological because of what 1897 was, because of Plessy versus Ferguson, and because when we tell history as Black people, because it wasn't written down by and large, we have to have an oral tradition, or we go to people and see where they land, and then we can see who was the president at the time, what area they lived in. That is the only way we understand our history. For 28 days in February, it's just simply not enough. We are Black every day and every hour, as other people are who they are. And so we need to be seen, and we need to have a context around our lives. And so what happened with Marian Anderson and the telling of this story, we had to employ reenactments because whenever she spoke on these audio tapes, television's visual medium, you couldn't see anything. So what would you put there? And so the choice could have been, some people said animation, and I didn't think animation worked for this film because of the time period. So that's how we went back to reenactments. And there's a wonderful house in Oak Park. It's the Beeson home, which is a landmark. It's also in the Maya Angelou film that I did. And the gentleman who owns it, keeps it impeccably in 1920, coal stoves, lighting, everything. And so we use that house from the cellar where we made the train by shooting through the windows and making light, to the turret where we made the church. He has 4 pianos in that house, to the fact that we took a window out so the little girl could walk up to it and peek in, because she couldn't safely get to the window because of where the house was. So we took a lot of care to make reenactments in both Philadelphia and Chicago to recreate that time period of her life, so that you could understand that she didn't just pop up in 1939, but that the church, which was our social programs and our government at the time, and the family that, and the father, the men of those Andersons, they all died. Life was harder, is hard enough for Black men now, but at that particular time, her father lives until she's 12. the James DePriest, her sister's son, his father lives until he's 5. The Anderson women, the grandmother who didn't have the agency to say, you're not going to be a maid because you're not going to be in a house where you could be raped, where anything could happen to you. And we're not going to give you the mindset to think, as a domestic, I clean and I go home, but as a maid, I'm at your beck and call. No, thank you. These women made choices in order to hold the family together. And women are doing that today. And that is part of what you wanted to be able to see. And so we employed reenactments, and we needed letters for you to hear the love between these people, the love between the mother, the love with the friend, Ida, they were after me, and just who she was as a person. So I think that you do a documentary in which way it calls you to tell the story, and you look at what's out there so that you don't do the same thing. Because just as we have 5 or so things that deal with Madiba, that deal with Mandela, you can have more that deals with Marian Anderson, but every documentarian needs to try to take the ball a little further. You cannot tell the same story in a certain period of time. You could not tell the story of Billie Holiday, Lady Sings the Blues. You could tell it that way, but Andra Day can do something different with Lee Daniels now because the world has caught up a little bit to a truth. So I think that that's the excavation and the way that you have to cut this and try to go forward and tell different aspects of a story as you learn more and more about a person.
Yes, and keep it in context of the time she lived in. We know she had a beautiful voice. We remember the idyllic moment again at the Lincoln Memorial, just stunning. We can play the records, but then to think that she was standing there in front of all these people, she was brave. The bravery it took to be there, knowing that you were putting your life on the line to sing in front of all of these people, that people were being arrested during this time for singing in integrated audiences, that you could be killed, that you could be jailed, that you could disappear. During this time, to put this voice, this beautiful voice, the beautiful song, singing in that context is a revelation. It can't be.
Absolutely. Rita, to one of your points, I would love to see either a fictional portrayal or a documentary on her mother visiting her in Europe. Just the description of how she framed it, her mother never, reading about these places and feeling that she would never see them. I want to see that. Whoever that person is who can make that film, I would love to see that. I think that would be so beautiful and heartwarming. To come to the next question, everyone has talked about support. Marian had a level of support that I don't think I'm familiar with at that time for someone in her shoes. I know the Black church is referenced as when they saw someone who had a certain amount of talent, they would pour resources into them and try to connect them and, give them, help them in their career. And it just seemed, even her grandmother, who was described as being this cold woman, right? And seemed to be holding her back from taking this job in Boston, but really was protecting her, as you said. there was just an instrumental amount of support because so many people knew what kind of talent she held who saw it. And I want to kind of tie that into the support that you all had created, linked together in making this film. And I think, well, it's obvious that a lot of Black artists, creatives are still either searching for, creating on their own in the industry. I would love to hear from all of you of how you find communities of support when you're in your own branches of, you know, your expertise of what you do, and what it felt like coming together to create this film, you know? So whoever would like to kind of speak to that, please.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
and get it out there. So I met Regina a few, maybe a decade or so ago. I know that we ended up having lunch, and I just remember that lunch, and it was across from what's Marshall Fields downtown. And I felt that we were going to work together. We were going to do something together, but also that we kind of needed each other. And you get to these points in these careers where it's actually frightening for, it may be for everyone, but I'm going to speak for Black women. You know you need the next step. You know that you're ready for it. You know that even if you aren't, nobody is. And you need to go there, but you need to be able to call and talk to somebody who can either talk you down, talk you through, or walk with you in this journey. And so we met each other, and when I did the Maya Angelou, Regina was there to read it and to sit in on the screenings and to do that kind of thing for me. And then once when the Maya Angelou estate wanted me to help them find a voice for something, I knew to call Regina, always mesmerized by her voice and her writing. Yes, she can do Maya Angelou for the Cleveland, whatever it is. And so we learned to support one another. And that support has been very sustaining in this film as well. I had the blessing, and this is what I think Black people really have to do. You have to keep going. You must continue. I don't care how you feel. You have to get out there. So I go to Chaz Ebert's Ebert Fest, and I'm sitting at a table with Brenda on one side and Michael Barker from Sony on the other side, and the curvy critic, Renata, I forget her last name, she's at the table, and we sit there. And I tell, and that's the other thing, tell it. I know everybody wants to hold things close to their chest, but when you're around sisters and when you're around other people, you must tell it. And I told Brenda what I wanted to do. She did not miss a beat. She did not eat another piece of crumpet. She said, I'll come on as an executive producer. I'm like, what? You know, because she just said it as we're sitting there. I said, I'm doing this work on Marian Anderson. And she said, Black people cannot make films unless they can find the money for it. I will come on and I will help you. And so when there's opportunities, go to these festivals, go to these places, meet people. When there's opportunities to walk up to someone, you know, you have these beyond the Black perspectives. That's how this happened. It didn't happen the minute I got on the committee. I didn't have a product at the time, but I think we have to keep ourselves out there and keep going. So that's what I really want to say. These two women are sisters and they know their stuff. Regina's here tonight, and she's also on the Wonder Years. Okay, go online and find it. And here's Brenda here, and you know, she sits on these boards and heads them up and knows the industry. I mean, this is Black girl magic. This is just a blessing. So these women have challenged me and supported me so that I could do what I needed to do. And poor Brenda, I don't know how many calls she's fielded where I need something else. Thank you. You know, and Regina's done the same thing on the other side. And so this is this kind of support. I think as filmmakers all across, we need to support one another. I think as African-American people, we know that there's still a seriously hostile environment out there that we have to get through and navigate through. And so we need that kind of support.
Yes. Come on, finger snaps. Okay.
I went to church for a minute, but I'm
yes, you did. Thank you.
I mean, to Rita's point, this is an industry of slammed doors. And so each of us has to decide that we're going to take steps to kick in those doors as much as possible and as often as we can. And you don't want financing to be a barrier to being able to actually have a seat. And you don't want lack of access and relationships and strategic partnerships and connecting points to hold you back. And so I appreciate being able to play that role. And I've played many different EP roles on different productions. And with this one, I was glad that the role felt meaningful, that it wasn't just finding the financing, you know, you have to do that and you get that out of the way, but it's also just being creatively involved and in touch with the material. And Rita ran a very inclusive production in that regard. And all of us want to come into these experiences and feel that fulfillment when we feel strongly about the material. It's not a transaction for any of us as storytellers. You know, it's a privilege to make movies. And many of us, storytelling is our form of activism. You know, it's how we get our point across. And this was a moment of activism. It was allowing the world to see just how important this story was and why we need to be doing this. And so it's important in this industry to find those partnerships, those relationships that can help create community on a production so that you all can have that experience when you're telling stories. And thinking about just what you have done up to this point and what you hope to do, all of that is possible when you find people whose values are aligned with yours. And that's what we have on this Zoom tonight. A group of women who want the same things. They want to highlight excellence, and they want to take the resources that they have and the voices that they have and lend them to storytellers and others who can actually help us create this history, preserve this history, share this history. And so all of those things are part of the experience. And they're all critical parts of just what it means to make a film.
Beautiful.
Yes, it is creating family. It is creating family as you go, recognizing like-minded people as you go, and holding on to them dearly through the best parts and the rough parts. I know that I've called Rita in the middle of the night sometimes, as well as she's done the same with me, sharing. Maybe there is something about lifting and supporting as you go, lifting and supporting, because we know how rough the road is. We have our high moments, we have our low moments, and that you know that other people understand that journey and will be with you because they recognize your passion, they recognize your brilliance, they recognize when you do it, you're going to do it right. and they hop on board to support you in that. It has been such a privilege to be a small part of this journey and to see the outcome of it. Gives me a great deal of joy.
Okay, now I want to film about John Payne's boarding house in London. And what everybody was talking about there, you know, that would be incredible too. Thank you for sharing. So we are coming close to the time where the audience can ask their questions. Everyone, please submit your questions in the Q&A and your Q&A box or your chat, and our beautiful tech operations manager, Michaela, is going to make sure that we see them all in a few. But going in before, we are soon to see a clip from the film that covers the Chicago 1919 riot, right? Where unfortunately a Black teenager was killed for, sadly, for something as minuscule as being drifted over in swimming in Lake Michigan, and was drifted over into the white portion, wild anyway, portion of Lake Michigan at the time. But before that we do that, my last question to you all is, how do you take care of yourselves as you move through the spaces that you are present in, and how you can, it seemed like Marian definitely had this engine, right? That just kept her going forward, right? Rita, you said just keep going. No matter how you feel when you're in this world as a Black artist, you just got to keep going. Brenda, thank you. I wrote it down. Storytelling is our form of activism. I am going to get that printed and put up somewhere so I can see that every day. Absolutely. But what are your methods of taking care of yourselves when maybe you don't have access to the people or the space to be reinforced? Where do you draw from within to keep going? Rita.
I was gonna not take it first that time. So, you know, I think I'm a person of faith, and so I rely on my faith. I rely on being led. And the older that I get, and things happen, I realize that, especially with this pandemic, nobody saw it coming and nobody has seen it leave yet. And yet we've had to go on, and we've had to find ways to do things. And the first thing that you have to do is to take care of yourself in order to be able to do that. I do my best to stay positive, and I do that so much that I can tell when I'm negative and I can tell when I'm fearful, and then I fight that. Because for filmmakers, particularly those who are here, and you have got to know that before you become something that has a label, you had that in you. Just like there was no way for Marian Anderson to just sing because she wanted to. She had to have that voice. So everybody has a talent that they're excavating. And for many of us, we know that it's film or it's acting or it's something, and we must take care of ourselves in order to be able to live out our purpose. So whatever I have a lot of physical things I do, but I think my anchor is just faith. You know, I wake up in the morning knowing who I belong to, and I am led to my projects and led through them. And sometimes I've had to totally rely on that when no projects were there. And you just have to have faith.
Thank you. Regina.
Yes, same. yes, to have faith. Uh, yes, to believe that you are here for a purpose and to find that purpose and to uh, shine that light that is always inside of you, even through the darkest of times. To understand that, to know that you can get through. Sometimes you got to lay down and rest, but to know that you can get back up and that there are so many journeys within a lifetime. And it is about not only emanating that light, but who you shine that light on and who you gain strength from through other people as well, in terms of what they're emanating, emitting. That's what you have on this panel. These really great, glowing, beautiful, amazing women. And you see that not only in their work, but in their lives. That is how these connections happen. Certainly, in meeting Brenda, that there's something about, there's so many things she could be doing. And then there are those things that she chooses to focus on, to shine her light on. That is that moves me, as well as, of course, Miss Rita. You see that in the projects that she's done before, and so you look forward to the next beyond here, because you know you're going to gain a great deal from one, being in her presence, but growing through her work.
Oh, so lovely. Y'all, come on now, hold on. Brenda.
I'm glad we could talk about faith openly, because all of us are in this industry, and sometimes it feels like we're made to suppress that, and that truthfully is the North Star for all of us, is knowing the purpose, and also just being proud of that, actually. And the other piece of it is, for me, I've had wonderful experiences making films. I've had challenging experiences. They're all learning experiences. They all got me to this point. And so I always think back to just the privilege of it all, that this is what we get to do. And everyone has a different job on this earth. And all of us are working towards advancing some cause or issue that's important to us. And so we look to just the most effective way we can do that and how we can be impactful. But it starts with just remembering the privilege that we have to be in this space, to have a voice, that someone wants to hear it. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal. It's not something any of us takes for granted. And so when you think about what motivates you to continue forward, it's exactly that. It's having people around you who have those goals in common with you, and who all recognize that none of what we do is to be taken for granted. And this process, this journey that you go on when you make a documentary film, no matter how much experience any of us has, no matter how many credits and laurels and awards, we all have to start from the beginning every single time we start a new project. We have to go back to the drawing board and start again, piecing together what the story is, going back out to those funders and getting the resources to actually do it, and then living with these stories, going on these journeys for a year or two or three. It requires patience and a steady hand. And you commit to that when you're making a film. And you stay with that journey till you get this beautiful product at the end that people can enjoy, and that hopefully has an extended life itself. Documentary films aren't meant to just be watched and forgotten. These are not one-off experiences. You don't go into a theater and watch it and leave. without thinking about it. And this is why we have impact and outreach campaigns attached to these films. Our objective as nonfiction storytellers is to create extended life for these films and these stories. And it's all about the conversation that comes out of the story and that long-term impact. So when you think about that, that's your motivation, that you have something very important to do and you have a huge responsibility. That's what keeps you going. And you continue just from this place of gratitude that it really is incredible that we get to do this work and that it matters to someone as much as it matters to us.
Absolutely. Inspiring the next generation. Thank you all so much. So as we transition to the next portion of our program, Rita, would you like to give context to the clip that we are about to enjoy, or we're about to view?
I think this clip, if everybody has seen the film, you've seen the clip. If you've not seen the film, this clip will inform you of a time period that is very important. And if you've seen it before, I like the idea of this clip because it brings together what I spoke about earlier. It's 1919. Nobody knows what that means when they walk out the door. And Marian Anderson decides to come to Chicago from Philadelphia. That's a long way. It's not something that's easy to do. And if it's 1919, she's 22 years old and she's caught in the middle of a race riot that is a part of Red Summer that we don't even know about yet, that there's going to be race riots all over the country. And she has to hold her own during that time. It affects her in her life. And she looks back in her life. And the music that you're going to hear is from Harry T. Burleigh. And he has written and put together a piece called The Crucifixion, which talks about the death of Christ, which in the Black church, spirituals classically arranged were able to extend out of the neighborhood and across the world. People who did not hear spirituals sang in fields or in churches were able to hear spirituals when they were classically arranged. And so this piece, The Crucifixion by Harry T. Burleigh, becomes a world-renowned piece, but it's also very personal to her journey at 22 years old and for the rest of her career. It sets the stage that no matter where she sings, she will not just sing classical, she will always add a spiritual, and she commits to that. And so that's kind of the setup of the piece.
Thank you. And as we watch this, if you have questions that come up, please submit them. Thank you.
In the summer of 1919, Marian Anderson traveled to Chicago for a 6-week opera course. She's coming from Philadelphia to Chicago during a time of unrest in the city.
What you have is a growing Black population, and there's tensions between the Black population and the white population.
An African-American young man had floated in the lake to the wrong side. They threw a rock and hit him, and he died. There was a race riot.
When she sang The Crucifixion in the 1950s, you could hear the memories of the South and the riots of 1919.
I mean, wow, always and forever, just listening to her voice, like, and just the levels. I know in the film, I forget sadly who the person is, but they're just talking about that she didn't really have to speak out because everything that was happening to the Black community, you could hear it in her voice. Her voice always, told that truth. And I need to find that record. I'm gonna have to get a record player. I need that on vinyl. It's so beautiful. So we are gonna go into the Q&A portion of the evening. And from Henry Barfield, thank you for joining us, Henry. Henry asks, what things did you have to leave out because of time constraints? We sort of touched on that, but is there anything that, Rita, maybe you hoped that, you could fit into the documentary, but just, for time constraint reasons, just, had to be edited out?
Well, initially, the documentary was going to be 90 minutes, and it is 2 hours, and 90 minutes is generally the rule. So the first thing was that we had to fight for an additional half an hour to tell the story. So that gave us at least an opportunity to add more than it was hard. I think that the idea that some of the history, I didn't want to let go. I didn't want to let go of the fact that Walter White from the NAACP, who was so fair-skinned that he could watch lynchings in the South and take that information back to the NAACP, was such a strong supporter of her and heard her and wrote to her when she was younger to support her, that the NAACP, we see Image Awards now, but had always known that we needed to be humanized by poetry and culture and what have you. But those kind of stories, they were Walter White stories, so they couldn't stay in. So we had to really condense. I think I wanted to do a little bit more with Marian Anderson's family. But it was concentrated in the beginning, but the care that she had all along to take care of them was almost as if she had to become the breadwinner for an entire generation. And she did that. Her nephew, James DePriest, was the child of a generation because he was the only, she didn't have children, her sister Alice didn't, and her remaining sister Ethel had one son. And the fact that he was able, because of her, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a drummer, he had every opportunity, she made sure of that. But she also gave him a Schubert piece when he was 16, and she made him learn it. And the King of Thailand invited him to do the piece. He did it, and he caught polio. And she had the relationships to call the Kennedys to say, get my nephew back over here. And so that kind of relationship and power and family story, I really wanted to tell it, but it didn't land on her only. So that had to be cut. There were other things like that, but that was one I really held on to until finally they had to jerk it away from me because it couldn't stand.
Okay. Wow. See, another another film that I want to see made. I need to see Marian on the phone or like writing that letter to the Kennedys. What did she say? Okay. Our next question also comes from Henry, asking, did you feel that Marian Anderson was with you during the making of this film?
Yeah. You know that picture where she is near the end, where she's looking over her shoulder and she's an older woman. I was in the basement of her home that is the Marian Anderson Museum in Philadelphia. It's a small row house that's been turned into the museum. And they had that picture blown up to the point that it covered the majority of a wall, her looking over her shoulder. And I was in the basement doing a reenactment of the daughters that never made the film, of the daughters getting tea from a coal stove that was the original down there for their father. And when I looked up and saw her picture over the shoulder, I felt that she was happy that I was respecting her father in the film as well. Black men were not respected. It is a horrible thing to want to take care of your family and not be respected, to take any job that you can, to try to take care of your family, to buy her a piano, to take her, that didn't make the cut, to see an opera when she was a little girl. She could have gotten the idea there, but he loved music and he took care of her. And I remember her, Jeanette DePriest telling me, and Sandra Grimes telling me that as she got older, they were by her bedside and she watched one of the documentaries, Rita, and she cried for her father. And I felt like I at least respected her father in the film, and that she knew that I had done that she wanted that to be done about her, that people didn't just see her appear in 1939, but knew that she had a father that used his money to buy a piano for her, you know, when she was a little girl. So yeah, I felt her. And it's a detachment issue. You know, I've been on this every day. She's been a part of my life since 2019. Like Brenda said, you know, you get attached and now you have to let it go and you want it to live. And that's why when all of you come and when the Chicago International Film Festival makes something like this possible, just to talk about it, it's really helpful. It's hard to let it go, but we have to let the film go and see what it will do.
Absolutely. We have time for 2 more questions. So I will go with Renee Magid. Asks, Marian Anderson was inspired by her aunt for her success. Do you think that her aunt's presence in her life shaped her faith in music and as a performer?
Absolutely. And I think everybody on here, we are aunts, we have aunts, we have mothers, we have, if you just have one family member, and if not that, one close friend, somebody that really believes in you, having a career in the arts wasn't like it was today. People did believe that if you could sing, that it was a gift from God. This wasn't like, oh, get a real job, which some people could say to you today. But people felt that if that little girl can sing like that, God did that. They believed that. And for Roland Hayes to also be that person. This didn't make the cut, but Roland Hayes got his voice by calling hogs. His father called hogs, and to call hogs in the South, you had to sustain a note and take it out and bring it back, level and sustain it. Because he was able to sing that way, when he went to Fisk and when he became one of the Jubilee singers, they didn't understand. How did his voice do that? This is a very hard thing to do, to sustain the tenor and the tone all the way up and all the way back over octaves. But that was the way you called hogs. Who knew, as spiritual Black people transported here through the slave trade, that calling hogs would take you all over the world? And that an aunt who recognized you and just took your hand and took you from place to place. Let's take the dollars, let's take the dimes. I believe in this girl. Her dad is gone. I'll take up the slack. That's the kind of family that really sustains us now. And those are the people that we are. These women I know, these are the people that we are. I know how much Regina, I'm just gonna tell it, I know how Regina took care of her aunt from every place around America. We're still these same women. This is something that happens in the Black community. I know how many times Brenda calls her mother. Call your mom a lot, don't you? And she's good to you and you're good to each other. This is who we are. I'm leaving here now when we're done and going to take care of my 99-year-old mother. This is part of the Black experience. And the only way that we get these stories out here and told and they become sustaining is that they have a truth in them that somebody else connects to. And that's why when Brenda said, when you leave the theater, you're supposed to think. You're supposed to think that if you're white, what part of Eleanor Roosevelt's abolitionist spirit do you have? When you start to hire people, are you going to open that door to other people on the other side? Because if you have power in the inside, the only way the people on the outside get to come in at that time was that somebody opens the door. Otherwise, they can't come in. You can't have all the lakefront property, or you can, and then see what happens. How do we come together as a group of people? It is social justice. It is race-centric. It is critical that we change and we don't just watch these things and have a good feeling. We need to make changes across this country for each other.
Thank you. Yep, you're right. Next question. Okay, we got two more. You are asking some really good questions in here. From Chris Rooney, asking, every time Marian encountered a big somebody who could open a door for her in the story, and this happened multiple times, I found myself fearful that this person would take advantage of her in some way. I found myself thinking of the challenges and traps faced by Billie Holiday and others, and yet this never seemed to happen, at least not in the film. In your research, how did you find that Marian managed to stay above these dangers and risks? Thank you, Chris.
I don't know that I found it in the research. I think that, I think for her, it was her faith that she kept going, because I don't know how many people will go in the Jim Crow South on a train and have to iron their gown out in the alley because the hotel that let them in had them dress in the broom closet and wouldn't let them iron because they, and then go sing in several languages until the people cried. The muscle that you build when you do something like that. I would have to say she had protection that was bigger than us, to see those riots outside the window and then go win the prize, to go to Germany. And it would be as if you were out in the South suburbs and there were marches with Nazis downtown and you decided you were going to go sing anyway. I don't know how she wasn't really affected. I don't know. I just didn't find that. I'm sure there were things, but she just kept going. I didn't uncover something where, you know, she couldn't go to the school, but she had the school of the church and the world. Those people that went to that school, I wouldn't think that two of them ever went where she went. And so I didn't find it. I didn't find the stop for her. Mm-hmm. I didn't find the no that she didn't push past.
Amazing. The last question that we'll ask is from Cecilia Horde. What characteristic did you decide to amplify in your life after connecting and studying Marian's life? All right, Cecilia.
Cecilia, you kind of deep, aren't you?
Okay.
Yeah, I think all three of us probably have something here. I think because of what, you know, Regina Taylor wrote Crowns. And I don't know if everybody knows and remembers this, but every time Crowns plays across the South or in America or in another country, the hats that women wore, you know, you got to break the hat down, what that meant on a Sunday to people who were treated as less than. And so they called themselves and named themselves Queen and Prince so that they wouldn't have to be talked at Hey Gal. The thing that I take away is I can't really afford to be fearful. I can't really afford not to do what I do. So when I get tired, I do take an adult nap every once in a while, but when I get tired, I really realize that because when you work on something like that and you hear those stories, you know, get up and keep going. Because that's just, we have this opportunity. It really is a huge blessing and gift to be able to make a film and have people that you don't even know all across the world see a vision, not just your work, but of this person, that you got the opportunity to do it. So it empowered me. It made me, it gave me more peace. And I felt better about myself. And I wasn't slouching before that, but I felt really good that if she could do this, I could do this. And that's why in the beginning, when she said those words, that she looked in the window, she saw a role model of somebody she didn't know. All of us have done that. You were the little girl that went to your aunt's place on the west side and saw the china she put on the table, but at your house you didn't have that, but you knew there was china. You know, so the role modeling that she did for me just empowered me more. I don't know what it did for you when you saw it, Brenda, or you, Regina, but I'm sure it gave you something else.
I mean, it definitely reminded me of what it means to persist. When you look at just the parallels between what was happening in her life and what she had to do, and I think what the three of us and what so many people have to do. I know just even what we have in common on this Zoom, all of us, Joyy included, is that we've all found ourselves in some space or at some table where, you know, we may have been the one opening the door, or we may have been the only representation in whatever category that may be. And there are moments where you feel the enormous responsibility of that and the pressures of that. And just there's a sense that you have to stay motivated to continue your effort and your journey, because you know it's not just impacting you, it's everyone that's coming up behind you. And the minute you can recognize that, that's what motivates you to just continue staying the course. And I think with her, Marian Anderson was fighting through so many obstacles. It was not an easy time, and she had to make a lot of brave choices, as she even had to fight to pursue her own talent, and just having to convince people that I get to do this. And so there is that sense that so many of us have that weight placed on us. We have to decide, we have to look for inspiration and just figure out, how do you take that and convert it into additional energy that propels you forward? And so when I looked at her and I thought, you know, I can't really complain trying to open a door somewhere, because look at what she had to do just to even be seen. And so now we're in this modern moment where we have a similar battle, but, you know, albeit very different in context, but there's still that through line. And you look at just what she had to do in one moment in the film towards the end, when we see her getting that Kennedy Center honor and knowing that she was one of the first people to get such an honor, they just started giving those, and to see Aretha Franklin singing to her, that was a big deal. It was a one small but meaningful reminder that she opened a door, and people recognize that, and that's what we're trying to do. And so I just saw that parallel in her, that everyone has some task or some goal or idea, purpose, that you just have to keep staying the course. And so watching her example was inspirational for me, certainly, and I think it's motivation for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, and yes, it is. I do. Going back to that moment where she gets a glimpse of something that she didn't know was possible, that you reveal the possibility and you ignite something in someone else by revealing that possibility, by doing what you do. That person finds what it is inside themselves that keeps them going. Certainly, I come from really amazing women who led by example, and I don't think that they knew that they had the right to complain. This is just the way it was for my mother, for my grandmother, and back. This is just how it was. And you just, you didn't take any vacation. It was just, there was no vacation from it. The each and every day of it, you just get up, you pray, and you do it. And you lead by example. Because the option, what is the option? And so it's good to continue in that vein, to let people know what the options are, so that they know that they can choose a way, and that there is always a way, even if you don't see it in the present moment, to know that inside your brain, inside your heart. And I think that's what's the wonder of making images, films, images that we can hold on to know.
Regina, what a beautiful, what beautiful words to end this on. What is the option? Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. This wonderful panel of incredible women. Thank you for the work that you have done, you continue to do. You inspire us and people who don't even know it yet. So thank you so much. Regina Taylor, Brenda Robinson, Rita Coburn, you all are amazing. Thank you, Cinema Chicago, WTTW, American Masters, PBS. Thank you so much for bringing this moment together tonight. I'm inspired, and I'm gonna call my mother after this, thank you, because she thinks she's grown and she hasn't called me today yet. So I know she's in bed, but we're doing that. Thank you all, and thank you for all the participants who gathered to join us in this discussion. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and happy Black History Month, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all.